And thank you so much, everyone here. So I'm going to kick off with a song because I'm feeling a lot of feelings right now. I think maybe a lot of people are feeling a lot of feelings right now. So we're going to get into them. That's what we're going to do. Whatever they've been hearing, I think they're hearing. Wait a minute, hear you out. Those were not your intentions. Not what you've been saying, meaning saying. Hold a minute, roll it back, you wrote it out. Those thousands of words. It doesn't matter what everyone else is saying. There's no forgetting what they did, they froze you out. So fuck their intentions. You're gonna make it right, you're getting ready. Sit a minute, think a minute, put it out. Whatever they've heard, they'll know who you are. Show them who you are. Wall-eyed, wild-eyed, frightened and feral, and your glory is coming for you. Now the moment's right, the moment's ready. Time is wasting, hurry up, you're slowing down. No more excuses. Hold your hands, your nerve, and hold them steady. You're ready now, so make your mother proud. Whatever you do, don't look back and don't back down. Don't let them tell you anything at all. The moment's now. Fuck all their excuses. Just another breath, another minute, then you did it. Your glory's come, you showed them how. They were waiting on you to know who you are. Tell them who you are. You are wall-eyed, wild-eyed, frightened and feral, and your glory is coming for you. Thank you. So, that is a song called Feral from my album in progress called Fellow Travelers. But I have already warned Gina, I've got a lot of thoughts at the moment and a lot of work in progress. So Gina asked me to read from a variety of things, and I thought, well, I'll have a look at them. And then I had a look at them and I thought, well, I'll just keep writing them. And I'll just keep writing them and I'll keep writing them. So now we've got a lot of things which are currently half written and half in here. It may change already because of the atmosphere of where we are, but that kind of is appropriate because what I wanted to speak about tonight was not simply from things I have already published or things which are already out there, but about this idea of the trans-imaginary and this idea of the moment in time we find ourselves. So I have written non-fiction in the past, I've written fiction in the past, I am an academic as well as a popular writer, and the two works that I'm working on most currently are a novel about trans history and a non-fiction book about trans history, and everything is history at the moment. And because people know I write history, I'm being asked an awful lot, where are we going in the future because of the things you know about the past? And that is making me think consistently and constantly about how it is that we are representing ourselves and each other in our own imaginations, and what that means for this moment in time and what it could mean. And that is what I wanted to read to you tonight. So this first reading was a short piece that I did, brought me back to blogging. So I had my start really as a non-fiction writer back in the heydays of blogging, which led to journalism, which led to a book deal, which led to the rest of my career, led to me being able to pay for my PhD. And I hadn't blogged for an awful long time, but the recent Supreme Court judgment and the EHRC clarification of said judgment led me back to it. And I just wanted to talk about a perspective that I felt hadn't been covered, which is in the EHRC's guidance, there was a slippage that not only could trans women not use women facilities, and not only could trans men not use men's facilities, but that certain trans women would not also be allowed to use men's facilities, and trans men would not be able to use women's facilities. I'm already getting very confused, and even though, have I got this the right way around? I have no idea, because the whole thing is so confusing. But essentially, that trans people would exist in a no-go area. And I found this so interesting because this immediately changed the EHRC guidance from something to do with legal sex to something to do with legal rights of privacy and the human right to privacy over one's own body, over one's expression of that body, and over the right to a medical history which is private. And that made me think about the historical work that I'm doing at the moment, particularly around sort of legal cases in the UK, in UK history, and what felt like a very deliberate action designed to turn the clock back on trans rights. And when Gina asked for me to talk about the future, that's what I could think about, was taking the clock back. So for those of you who don't know, before April Ashley's disastrous and highly publicized divorce case in the late 1960s, trans rights in the UK were a deeply grey area. They were a deeply grey area for trans people of all kinds, highly dependent on what kind of societal privilege you enjoyed, what you could lay claim to, what you could kind of sneak around through. So whether you could have your documents updated, for example, whether you could live without interference would depend on wealth, privilege, luck, whether you had an in at the and so in the government records, we have data in the archives showing internal memos from people who made life easier for others, whether you could, as someone like Michael Dillon, have an old university lecturer who was kind to you and would change your documents over under the table. But that all changed when what trans people were began to be codified in law. And I would say that that was with a judgment made by a certain Judge Ormrod. And he was tasked with deciding whether it was possible for April Ashley, who had been legally married to Arthur Corbett, whether it was possible for her to have been legally married to Arthur Corbett, seeing that she'd been assigned male at birth. So he ruled, after a long, extensive, and deeply abusive investigation into who April Ashley was, what her body was like, he ruled that it was not possible. He claimed that April Ashley's vagina was not a real vagina. He spent a long time detailing that. If you want to see a man with problems, exploring them on the page for everyone to see, I highly recommend you go and read his obsessive comments about her genitals and whether a vagina is too close to an anus. That takes a long time. That goes on for a very long time. And whether a way that Judge Ormrod believes is true. With this ruling, Ormrod stripped trans people of the patchy recognition. It only ever had been patchy, but even that little patchy recognition was forever gone. And it was declared that trans people are forever the sexes they are assigned at birth. And there are many different footnotes I could put into this, including the fact that it was ruled also that another woman who had had a vagina created was allowed to stay married because on discovering her karyotype was intersex, she was allowed to remain married. Ashley had the same karyotype test done, and it was discovered she was not intersex, and therefore she was not allowed to remain married. Again, Ormrod has a lot to say about this. But several legal scholars have pointed out, and special thanks to Alex Sharp, who pointed this out in her work. In Ormrod's own judgment, he creates a gap, and I don't know if you can see what it is, that there now is a gender fail state that trans people are in. If they go a certain way into being trans, if they go too far where they can no longer be rescued and have the surgery, then Ashley could not consummate her marriage as a man, and she could not consummate her marriage as a woman. And in this legal ruling, Judge Ormrod created a third legal sex in the UK, which only could be created as a fail state and as a way to strip people of their rights. And I believe in the same way, what we see with the EHRC guidance is that certain trans people, the trans people who cannot be dissuaded, who cannot be convinced otherwise in their view, are now a fail state and are deserving of being treated as a fail state. And I wanted to draw attention to this because of its punitive nature. The way that we can see so clearly this is about creating a society of haves and have-nots, a way of saying that certain things are only accessible to those who are deemed worthy. So in Ormrod's case, marriage. In the EHRC's case, access to public life. Because again, if you try and access public life without access to public bathrooms, good luck to you. I tried that with my OCD, it was really bad. It's very hard. It's a way of creating an underclass, and that way of creating an underclass, I believe, comes with an additional sting, an additional benefit. Effectively, if you believe trans people are sick and undeserving, you have an additional benefit when you create this third underclass. Because then if you are a trans man or a trans woman, or a gender, if you are, in their eyes, a gender-conforming trans man or trans woman, who can, again, problematic language, but let's walk along here what they're looking for, who can pass, who can get along with your life, who cannot detransition, what are you meant to do? Either you remove yourself from public life, or you are forced into hiding who you are because your right to privacy is now forever dependent on whether people are going to jump in and assume something about you, question something about you, ask for documentation, ask for you to prove to them that you are a real man or a real woman. What are you meant to do? Do you out yourself as one of them and have no access to protection and no recourse to legal fightbacks? Or do you keep being trans a terrible and shameful secret and you hope to God that you're never outed? So you don't tell people, you don't go on pride marches, you don't wear a trans flag, you don't talk about your life story, you don't open up to friends, you don't advocate for yourself, you don't advocate for others. Critically, you don't join with other people like yourself, you don't build mass, you don't build a movement. This is union busting 101. So this punishment is designed to take us back to precisely where we were in the mid-20th century, where transition was effectively a death sentence. And it was pushed as a death sentence to trans people, that you would leave your life behind, that you would disappear, change your name, change your documents, and live in fear of the people who had power over you to out you and ruin your life. And people did out trans people and ruin their lives if they dared to take a step above their station. April Ashley had been fine until the man she married didn't want to pay the alimony he promised her. That's when he took her to court, because how dare she think that she deserved just a sliver of his inherited wealth? Caroline Crossey, who was an actress, was fine until she wanted to make mainstream roles, and then she was outed by the press. Why could she have a career? She's a trans woman, she ought to know her place. Linking of growing up in the 90s, that was the story again and again in the newspapers, on television, that trans people were fine if they kept in their dark corners, but the minute they tried to have access to anything, that's when you broke them. That's when you said, no, we've held the secret over you. And I think that punishment, that recourse to outing as a punishment, it was everywhere. It was something you could do with impunity. You could humiliate trans people, you could ostracize them, and you could keep them in line with the threats and the realization of violence. And this was the status quo for a very long time, and until quite recently. And I think there are a lot of people in this country who want that status quo back, and they are doing everything they can to get there. If you deny trans people access to public life, then they disappear. If you deny trans people access to a private life, then you can no longer afford to be public. If you deny the contagion that we represent the chance to spread, and then you can cut the trans plague off altogether. And I think this is the choice that we are at the moment. When we are thinking about our futures, are we willing to accept this idea that we will be pushed back to that point, if it's even possible? Or do we upturn what they are trying to do and think much, much bigger in terms of what our futures could hold? So I don't know what those answers are, and I think part of the event tonight is to think together that maybe none of us know what the answers are, but we've got some ideas. But I did want to say, and this is the theme for tonight, that the clock never ever goes back, it only goes forward. So thank you so much for listening. But I wanted to sing some songs here, and two songs, one which is a new one from this work in progress, and one which is one of the first songs I ever wrote, which I think speaks to the fact that I think for a lot of us, we are struggling with the fact that we have lost something. At least I'm struggling with that. It felt like things were going forward. They clearly weren't going forward in a linear and easy way, but they were going forward. And now there is that sense, as people are trying to pull us back, what if that going forward never happens? What if we had something? What if we had something that was so close and now we've lost it? And I think until we start to sit with that, until we are able to look that square in the face, it's going to be hard for us to move forward. And there are two songs I've written. One is from my new album about the weight of growing up different and what that does and warps to us, and the way we carry that forward and the way it warps and distorts what happens in our futures. And then a song that I wrote a long time ago that was on my first album called Ashes, and it's the titular song. And when that song came out, when that album came out, nearly everyone assumed it was about the end of a relationship. But I wrote it about having to live after my brother had died, and what it means to go forward in a landscape where loss is a constant, always, and yet still to have to go forward. And the only way to do that is to truly inhabit the loss you find yourself in. So, thank you. I wanted to share these two for this moment in time. You shut it down, never tell and never claim to, but it won't stop them wondering what you came to. You could have had it all this time, you could have had it made. You had a plan, a friend. If you hadn't been what your shame made you. You said you'd never beg again. There was nothing that could make you. You'd choke on your need before you'd ever believe a need could break you. You wouldn't treat a dog this way unless unless you were ashamed to, but you did, you'll do, and you're proud to be what your shame made you. Oh, you and and you've got nothing to say, and nothing's what you made. You had it all, had me by your side until it shamed you. At least you'll never beg again. At least that's what you claimed. You thought you were safe, but you know everyone breaks until they break through. You wouldn't treat a dog this way, except now you said it made you. You did, you'll do everything that your shame made you. Oh, you and stay small. It's only nothing from nothing. Stay small. We're watching ashes as they fade. Call out, go on and bellow for something. Look round. We're rushing, rushing as it fades. Call out, call out, call out for a quiet sound. Fall down, a blur in a concave ring. Washed out, we're holding tight to what we've saved. Deep bow and sleep into nothing. Press down, Still a hollowed core can feel afraid. Call out, call out, call out for a quiet sound. Stop now, we can't tell nothing from nothing. Look round, there's not a single mark of what we've made. Press down, why waste ourselves in this rushing? We're only watching ashes as they fade. Call out, call out, call out for a quiet sound, for a quiet sound. Thank you. So then I was singing those pieces and I thought about what is it that I need? What is it that we need? What is it that is happening in this moment and past from this moment? And a couple of years ago, the literary magazine Wasafiri asked a group of trans writers to write a project together called Discontent, Spray Paint and Desire. And it was a series of letters, a letter chain between Saba Chowdhury, between Nat Raha, who is here tonight, and whose work has been nothing but an inspiration for a long time, and for Ros Caveney and myself to speak to each other across the isolation of the pandemic and the isolation of the political horror shows we continue to find ourselves in about who we are and where we're going. And there was a lot of talk about trans history again in these letters, a lot of talk about where we'd been and finding strength from that. And it set something off in me, and this is what I wrote. Dear friends, thank you for your beautiful letter and for giving me the space to reflect on your words and add my own to keep this chain of communication going. I have sat with your thoughts for several days now, trying to articulate what it is that I feel and what I need to say. You wrote of looking back, of wanting to look forward, but you also spoke of the middle, and it was that that caught me, because what I need right now, what in fact I am desperate for, is to be able to look at each other in this moment, in this place. You wrote, there is no more solid proof than your word and mine, and it made me hungry for that sensation of being seen and being held, in and through the understanding and insight of others, in a shared space of recognition and acceptance. I don't think it's any one thing that has created such a sense of urgency in this feeling, but a combination of factors. Aside from experiences personal to me, a pandemic is a bad time for a cultural backlash, even if intellectually we understand why they so often go together. What I do know is that I can feel a deep shift in need from what used to sustain me to what I'm craving now. I grew up sublimating my present needs and desires into plans for a better future, putting my hopes outside of myself and into an imagined reality, losing myself in the work I needed to do to get there. And trans histories are both work and pleasure, somewhere I'm used to going in order to find inspiration, courage, a sense of fellowship, and also the material I can use to reach others, to challenge them, to bring them comfort. But right now, neither one of these strategies is enough to sustain me. In order to lift my eyes up and look further, I need something I can hold in my hands now. I want it for myself and I want it for others, because this experience is by necessity made between people and not on one's own. I want to be seen, and I want to enable other trans people to see themselves, to be a part of a larger process generating illumination like a beam of light bouncing across and through a hall of tilted mirrors. I want to go further than this. I want the luxury of pleasure beyond survival for others and for myself. I don't want the concept of a possible future, but instead the weighty, visceral reality of a beautiful present which multiplies and stretches onwards. I want to enjoy the sound of trans people's laughter, the expressions on our faces, the ways in which we look at each other. I want to share food with friends and community, to literally feed others and be fed in turn, and to dance in a place full of bodies which are different and are all full of joy. I want to march with the strength of somebody else's arm in mine and hear someone else's words in my ears. I want a present which is so full, not perfect, but full, that I am in love with its continuance. What I don't know is how to make these longings real and to get to that place. Do you? I feel as though I've done it before, and I should know how to do it again, but I can feel myself struggling and running low. I worry that this is a selfish question because who isn't struggling? I'm not trying to pretend that my losses have been any greater because they haven't, or that my distress is more important because it is not. This isn't asking you to put aside your own needs and your own burdens to take care of mine. Instead, it's the hope that maybe this could be a mutual question. Not me instead of you, but you and me both. Something that could make more room for us all to be, and more joy for us to experience, the more people who ask and the more people who answer. It scares me to be this open and vulnerable with you all. But something being trans has taught me is how need will and must break through the barriers created by fear, even barriers so rigid and fundamental that much of the world considers them immutable truth. Right now, I need other trans people more than I want to pretend that it's possible for a person to make it alone, because I can't make a future without it. And I was thinking, after I reread that piece, that I think one of the problems that we face, not just as trans people, but as all people, is that when we name a need, we can no longer deny the fact that it exists. And when we name a need, and we know that it exists, and we can feel it pressing all the time, we have to live with the possibility it may never be fulfilled. Or maybe it was once fulfilled and then it was gone. And maybe we will just keep living and living and living with that awful, aching need that won't come right. But how are we meant to get anything if we can't even name it? And so I wanted to sing a song tonight which I have not sung for a long time, because it is about that need, and it has been too painful to try and sing it. But I think I am tired of pretending that needs go away if you don't look at them. And that applies to absolutely everything. So I think we should be looking inside ourselves and seeing how greedy we can really be. I've been running down my store of care, and I'm so tired of finding longing everywhere. There's an ache that comes from waiting when there's no one there. frozen arms and empty air. I've been yearning for a chance to grow, and for a single chance to come home. I can feel it like a ghost against the skin, and this veneer of solitude is wearing thin. Is it weakness to be wanting, wishing something would begin? Open up and open in. Is what I'm heeding just a coward's call? Or a simple wish to come home? And can you hear me singing out across the line? And are you coming? Will you get to me in time? I can almost taste your breathing, feel your fingers clasped in mine. Send a signal, send a sign. And I'm not begging, but I need to know. If there's still a chance to come home. Thank you. So this is part of a lot of thinking which is happening at the moment, which is going into both books and an essay, and I have too many thoughts to even begin to put them all in one place, but I thought if I started them here, then we could talk about them together, and then it would make the thoughts better and richer and more as they are meant to be. So what I've been thinking about a lot at the moment is Thomas Kuhn's Structure of Scientific Revolutions, so that 1962 book. And I am not a scientist, but I have a lot of family members who are scientists. I have loved a lot of scientists and a lot of people who are very into philosophy of science, and so Kuhn has been part of my life for a long time. And for those of you who have not been given reading to do to catch up with the people around you in exchange for them reading Russian literature and books about Beethoven, I think probably what we can say, if I trying to explain this brilliant, brilliant book, is that rather than scientific advancement or changes in thinking, changes in theoretical frameworks, rather than those changing gradually over time in a linear curve, they change with paradigm shift. So a different way of seeing the world, a different way of encountering data, a different way of understanding data, or applying things differently, looking differently, seeing something totally new because you have looked differently. And it's not the conversion of one old paradigm into a new one, but the ascendancy and domination of a new paradigm over the old. And I've been thinking a lot about this recently because I truly believe that this is what we are currently caught in. Not just about trans rights, but about trans rights. So for the transphobes who oppose us, and that is those at the HRC, it's those in the press, it's the billionaires who are bankrolling movements against us, not only is it expedient for them to do so, but it is also because it isn't a fight. It isn't a disagreement, it's not a debate, it's not that they don't agree with our interpretation of the world. It's that for them, our interpretation of the world literally does not exist. It's nonsense. It's either perverted lies or it's insane delusion. It's nothing. It cannot be allowed to exist, but beyond that, it just doesn't. And there is nothing that we can do that would make them want to even begin to try to see the world through our paradigm. And for those of us in this paradigm, this is the reality of our existence. So for the scientists who do believe and understand sex, gender as a linked system of pluralities and variations and changes, this is the reality. For the historians and anthropologists and sociologists, for feminist organizers, for people in community, for people doing community research, for people who look at the archives, for people who see the archives in daily life, this extraordinary diversity of the ways in which human beings understand and present ourselves, our bodies and our societies and our imaginations and our sense of self, our possibilities, those creative ways of doing so, those incredibly limitless ways, that is just the reality. For every trans person here, or every person here who knows a trans person, who's friends with a trans person, this is just the mundane reality of existence. This is as boring and as basic as talking shit over a cold beer and worrying about how you're going to pay the bills and recommending a good dog groomer to your friend. It's boring, it's nothing, it's just the quality of the day. And it's also the extraordinary quality of every peak moment of our human existences. It is giving birth, it's falling in love, it's keeping vigil with the dying. And they are two separate paradigms. And I think there is a huge pressure right now, both external and internal, to downplay the immensity of this, because it is an immense task. And the work that it requires, its risk is enormous, but so too is the change it will make, both in the process of happening and in its success. And again, coming back to history, to pasts and futures, I think that some of that pressure is coming out, is being expressed by a call to an imagined better past, where trans people's goals were modest and we were left alone. We could exist in that previous paradigm, swept under the rug. And sometimes it's very openly expressed as that, as a way for people to say, this is my campaigning goal. And sometimes I think it's expressed merely in this idea that it was all better and then it all went wrong. And sometimes it was all better 20 years ago, and sometimes it was all better 10 years ago. And yes, things are bad right now, but I'm wondering where this call for this, but it was better, it was better, it was better, is coming from. I was thinking about this in particular. I saw someone online, and they were talking about how, from their perspective, things were better for trans people, that they were safer for trans people under Section 28. And then they said that they had only come out as trans in 2017, and that during Section 28 they were a child. And that was an instant reaction for me, because I came out during Section 28. I was a trans teenager during Section 28. And things were not better at all. I didn't even have the language to say I was trans until I was 17. I started off by saying to friends the only words I knew how to say, which are, do you ever feel like you're trapped in the wrong body? I don't know why I feel like I'm trapped in the wrong body. What's happening to me? I don't know what's happening. When I was 11, or when I was 13, saying to my friends, I think I'm a transvestite. What does that mean? Or when I was 15, coming out saying, I just don't do gender. I don't know what that means. I'm not a girl. I'm not a boy. I don't know what that means. And then finally finding that word trans at 17, from Kate Bornstein and Leslie Feinberg, and saying, that's what I am. But all through that, being isolated and bullied and abused by adults and by my peers, and having no recourse whatsoever and no one to talk to and no community, it was not better to be trans under Section 28 as a vulnerable teenager. It was not better to be trans, I would say, for nearly any trans person under Section 28. There wasn't a golden age of live and let live for trans people. Anyone who has older trans friends will know that. Anyone who lived through the 50s, 60s, and 70s will know that. But there is this myth-making I'm seeing online, and I see it with videos taken out of context, headlines taken out of context about press reports from the 1910s and 20s, snipped completely away from the context and the lives that they ruined in the process, being misread and misunderstood to say that actually society in general, the press in general, was okay for trans people in the 1920s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and 60s. And I'm really wondering why it is that we persist in thinking this. And maybe it is simply because there is that general human trend for nostalgia, that we hark back to a better time, the time which is always lost and can never ever be regained, that it's less frightening. Because if we could only do things the right way, if we could only curtail what our community is doing and what we're asking for, if we make ourselves small enough that we can go back to that time and we could be safe, is it not wanting to face up to the moment that we are currently in? But I also wonder in that, is there a sense, a recognition in this desire to go back, a recognition that we are on the move, that we are already moving, and that it is absolutely impossible to go back, that the future is not safe because it hasn't been made yet, that the present is not safe because the present is never safe. So maybe the past has to be safe because we have to have something. But even if it was, we can't go back. And I think there is a similar kind of reasoning here in an argument that I see across activist groups, across media representations, particularly, it must be said, with cis allies saying, but we're such a small group, we're such a tiny minority, we just want to be left alone. Again, maybe we're safe, maybe we can go back to that, to the edges. And we are a small minority. Out trans people are a small minority, but with an outsized impact on every rule and boundary and idea and possibility of how every single person lives. And I do truly think if we come back to paradigms, that those people in that first paradigm who call us a contagion, I think that's the one thing they're right about. I think this is a contagion of a paradigm shift that has not only the potential to change the world for everyone, not just trans people, but it has already started to do that. We are not where we were, and we are not where we are going, but we are in that process and we can't go back. And there is no way for us to reconcile these paradigms. We cannot reconcile with these people, which does not mean we can't reach other people. It doesn't mean that education isn't important. It doesn't mean that outreach isn't important. But it does mean that we do not have a single moment to waste, whether our time or our energy, on an impossible task, which is to try to convert one paradigm to another. And I keep thinking that if you have an outsized goal, if you have an enormous weight that you need to shift, you don't break your fucking lever on top of it. You find your fulcrum and you put that lever to play and you lift it and you change. And this is a song I wrote kind of about that back in 2014. This song is Ether. Be the message, not the man, a murmur on the wind. Desire, leave yourself behind, will consist of infallible things. Still my shaking, still my shaking. If we could shift in endless space and bypass every bar, let the message speak itself and abstract's all we are, and still my shaking, still my shaking. If I could lift through ether and consist of abstract things, be the message, not the man, a murmur on the wind, and still my shaking. Still my shaking. Thank you. So I have one more reading and I have one more song tonight. So I was asked to do an event at the London Library this year, and my head was absolutely full of the research I had just put into the novel and of the research I was putting into the nonfiction book, and I couldn't think of anything else. And then I thought about these people that I was writing about and thought about what it was that I wanted to say. So I also have been thinking about Ursula K. Le Guin's quote about love being like a hand in the dark, reaching out, and about the ways in which studying history can be like that it isn't about knowing the past, it isn't about knowing the future, it's about those brief moments where it feels like there is a hand reaching out in the dark, and that we are reaching backwards and we are reaching forwards. And I was thinking about those people and our current moment, and I wrote this. It was a Thursday night in Paris, 170 years ago. 2 rooms, certainly unpretentious in the words of their occupant, just up from the Champs-Élysées and crowded with a group of people perhaps not so different from this group here tonight. They were there for a baptism of one of their own, led by a woman whom as a boy had been called by her parents Auguste, who named herself La Belle Anglaise, the girl they were there to baptize, as they baptized every new member of their society, had been known by many names. Laura, Pauline, Natalie, Bert. Before and afterwards, when she submitted her story to a sympathetic medical doctor, she said that she had been named and then signed her name as Arthur. She was a singer, she was a performer, she was a kept woman, she was a star of the demi-monde, and in her own words, she had triumphed over nature in daring to make herself a woman, in seizing the happiness that had been kept out of reach in all those early years when she had been compelled to live as a boy and knew that she would not have it. La Belle Anglaise called the group to attention. All these young ladies, she said, and gestured to her fellow trans women, and our dear sisters, and she gestured to their lesbian friends, both the society beauties and the tribades who did and did not live as men. The guests stood up. The girl would later recall, when she told the world this story, that they did so, in her words, with absolute seriousness and a real sense of gravity. La Belle Anglaise had her own holy words, and with her words she said, "On behalf of all these assembled here, I now baptize Arthur as the Countess," and she anointed her with Veuve Clicquot champagne. In this moment, I am increasingly called upon to give an oral account of my own history. Even as a historian, I am interviewed by PhD students. I am interviewed by people writing books about the trans present and the trans future by talking about my trans past. In interviews, I am nearly always asked at the end, what is going to happen? Sometimes I am asked, is there any hope? And sometimes I am asked, what does history say will happen next? When you're contracted to write history, the research is only one part of it, because what you're really being hired for and paid for, certainly with popular history, is to tell a story about the world now and how we're meant to understand how we got here and where we're going. And people ask, and there's no good or accurate answer I could give, because you see patterns in research, you see patterns in the archives, you see patterns and points of comparison, and neither one of those things can tell you the future. So instead of a prediction, I wanted to give you a moment instead. In Paris, between the Countess and her friends and her coming into her own being. Not because of an inspiration, not to say that she is a role model, not as the argument, see, we've always existed, that means we deserve to exist now. But because in this very particular narrative, in this particular words, in her life history, she shared with the world how hungry she was. Not for any life that she could scrape together, but for a beautiful life. Not just to be the woman she knew she was, but to be the beautiful woman she knew she was. To be loved, to be adored, to be admired, to be feted. Because she wanted applause, she wanted her flowers, and because she got them. Because she was baptized in champagne. Because her life was suffering as well as joy, and because she didn't limit her hunger because of it. Even later, when she was sent to prison for dodging the draft, she met the love of her life there. She never stopped being hungry. And we ask these questions, what happens next? I think out of our own hunger, which is a hunger for safety and for survival, for reassurance, for courage. And as I've shared previously this evening, God knows I am hungry for that too, but I am hungry for more than that. I am hungry for beauty and for love and for celebration and for triumph. And I think a lot of people are hungry for all of those things. And I think we don't dare sometimes to call attention to that hunger. And we end up eating ourselves from the inside out. And we eat ourselves and we eat our own communities. And we get thinner and thinner. And we cannot even starve ourselves out of our own needs. And a lot of people are asking us to do that in this moment. In the name of this historical moment, saying if we just do that, we could survive. If we just do that, we could go back in time and go back in history and we could survive. So I wanted to share a story from the actual historical record of the Countess. And I wanted to say, stay hungry and get fed. Thank you so much. This song is called Fellow Travelers. It's the long hour after midnight, and I don't know what to do. And you said, hey, tell me what's hurting you. I'm never easy when I'm feeling powerless. Admitting that is something new, so I said, tell me, can I lean on you? Because I'm scared to see this through. Tomorrow's mine to prove. But I want it to be with you. I never thought I'd have the need to yield to this. Working on my own was what I knew, but I'm tired. I'm scared, I need something new. I need reminding of my fellow travelers that they're sometimes tired too. I need time. I need to lean on you. Because I'm scared to see this through. Tomorrow is mine to prove. But I want it to be with you. I'm never easy when I'm feeling powerless. There's a power in that feeling too. I can be tired and scared and build something new. I put my trust in my fellow travelers. Though that's sometimes hard to do, I need time to build my faith in you. Because I'm scared to see this through. Tomorrow's mine to prove. But I want it to be with you. Because I'm scared to see this through. Tomorrow is mine to prove. But I want it to be with you. Thank you. Maybe we'll go backwards and forwards.
I'm with an expert.
I am so not an expert, it's embarrassing.
Okay. So, we will be opening this up for the audience. In the meantime, thank you. I'm happy to start the ball rolling. There are so many things that you've talked about. I love these three words, beauty, love, and triumph. Tonight feels like one of those nights. So many great songs talking about need, talking about the desires that we have, that we must never stop giving up on those desires. So many questions that I could ask. But let's talk for a moment about the imaginary, the trans-imaginary. You talked about, for example, a project that you're working on at the moment with other trans singers or musicians. I wondered if you could share this kind of experience of the things that trans people are doing at the moment, things that are happening in spite of everything.
Okay, so I am a member of a group called Trans Voices, and it's the UK's only, at the moment, professional group of trans singers. And it was started by a musician called Ila, and she she started as a theoretical physicist, and also is an incredible composer and arranger and amazing singer and incredible performer. Phew, I mean, like the list goes on and on and on. And she started a group called London Contemporary Voices, which is one of the sort of biggest commercial bookers for, the proms, for gigs, the kind of thing. If you need a choir for Glastonbury, you call them. And then sort of Elo, when she was coming out, was like, well, why don't I do the same thing for trans vocalists? And started pulling together a group of incredibly diverse backgrounds. So some of us are classically trained, some are folk trained, some are very much in like pop and electronica, some people are in experimental, and it's a kind of group of about 20, changing depending on what we do. And I'm just trying to think in the last year, so there's an amazing song out at the moment from an artist called Hi, who's an electronica artist. It's getting a lot of airplay on Radio 6 called Satellite, and that's us singing with her. And Haai. Really great. We were Kesha's backing vocalists at Mighty Hoopla, as one does. So that was great. We're currently one of the features of Barbican's first ever immersive show, which is about sound. It's about sound immersion. So one of the things that Ila does is that she does a lot of work with quantum technology and the ethical use of generative AI, not the horrific type, but literally building a data set from artists where we create a small data set which doesn't take horrific amounts of energy to run. Then we decide how we use it and use it almost like a synthesizer, where our own voices then become a system that we can play with. And then in this exhibition, our voices, then you can sing into it and we will sing with you. So it's now going to go on tour for 5 years across the world, that anyone who wants to come and sing with trans voices and have a trans voice linked with their own voice, they can. And we made that 3 incredible recording sessions, improvising through 4 octaves of sound. And as someone who grew up reading the idea that trans people can't sing, can't make music, trans voices is incredible. I mean, I just, and Ila, just all my hats off to her, like, just and Koda Nikolaev, I would say as well, is also a co-founder of Trans Voices, the two of them together. I'm in awe, and I work with them, so, yeah. Look for it online, yeah. We went super viral on TikTok for Kesha. I'm not on TikTok, but I got people sending it to me, so there was a lot going on there. And yes, she did wear a Protect the Dolls t-shirt, but also she paid us really well, so, yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? Yes, over there, Merlin. Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, could you speak a little bit more into the mic? Sorry, when your mouth moves away, I get a little bit of a, it's all right. I mean, I feel I could talk about hunger and desire for a really long time, but I think almost where I am at the moment is I feel that so many of us end up in a situation. I'm thinking about sort of children who've been trained out of not even being able to tell their own physical needs because they have been neglected by caregivers. And I think that is one, an experience that many of us will have. But two, is something I feel it's almost, even being able to feel that hunger, to actually be able to point to it and say, there is a point there is a point where I feel it. I feel that sometimes we're not even there yet in terms of where we are as a movement, if that makes sense at all. And even to be able to, thinking a lot, sorry, I'm babbling away, but I don't know if people have noticed or picked up on it again, there's a use of very softening language, I feel sometimes, particularly in online spaces. When I see an awful lot is, oh, I feel so burnt out, or I feel so stressed. You're like, is it burnout or is it despair? You know, is it stress or is it literally debilitating existential pain? Because I don't know about you, because that's what I'm feeling. I am a depressive. I know what depression feels like. This isn't depression. This is different. But if I can't even name it, how on earth am I meant to go there? And I find it interesting, not all parts of our communities, and of course there are so many multiple interlocking communities, but some of them where it's almost like I can't even go there. I can't even name how much I need, because it's almost like that baby that will never ever be full and will just cry forever because they cannot be sated. And you could go really Lacanian about this, but yeah, that's not. But yeah, I just think sometimes we need to wail a little bit more and cry and know that, you know, that's the first step. But yeah, we could talk so much more. But thank you for an amazing question. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, in the back.
Mm. I mean, I think what's really interesting me at the moment is the whole walled garden internet. And I think, you know, Catherine Cross, her book Log Off is absolutely amazing, and I would recommend her work. I think it's really interesting to me that as a teenager, I got online really young because my father needed it for his work, and we had it at home on dial-up. But that era before social media was so totally different, you know, that you're building your own web. I built so many websites. They were so awful. You had little guest books, and it was great and amazing, and everyone had like a hot rainbow background. It was very bad for your eyes. And, you know, it enabled me to punch above my weight. It enabled me to start, you know, this first queer youth group in the UK, to co-found it with someone in Manchester. We never met in person. We communicated entirely online, and, you know, we managed to do everything with like our crappy old Word and Excel functions, and, you know, and I built a website for it, and my school threatened to sue me for disrepute, I think. Yeah, I know, it was a very weird time. Again, Section 28 it gave adults a full reign to bully children. And I get really sad when I see people who didn't grow up with that, who see the internet in terms of like 4 apps, and discourse as something that only operates within those 4 apps, and within the algorithmic content which is showing you people of the same age, or is showing you things to deliberately antagonize, because obviously that's the best way of creating engagement. I'm not a scholar in this area. I don't know where we go from now, except I really hope a lot of it blows up really fast because I think it's so toxic. I think the data already starting to come out about the impact on people's mental health is so appalling. I think on our political health, on our sense of sanity, I think is really frightening. And I would love to see more intergenerational, almost like projects, like what could we do instead? Because I miss those old internet days and I don't think we're getting them back. But I think at least it can say that it is more than just 4 apps. More than being shown this tiny sliver of humanity and being told that's the trans community. Like, fuck it is. Jesus. It's a minuscule, tiny, tiny part of the world. And if you only look through it, I saw, oh dear, again, sorry, big nerd, really sorry. You can tell. I saw someone talking about the Lord of the Rings, when he's looking through, and, it's only shown, the Palantir, yeah, exactly, and now, oh God, and can only see the horrors and that way that you're brought down. You no longer have any hope to fight, and I think about that a lot. Again, that wasn't me that came up with it, but we look at our little social media worlds and we see that, and we think it's real. It's not. So it can lead us to each other. It can do tremendous things, but I would argue that's human connectivity. That's not a social media app. It's despite that rather than because of that.
So can I ask, have you reduced your online footprint?
I try really hard to because it's so bad for my mental health. So I'm pretty open. I had a mental breakdown at 13. Jesus. I cyclothemic manic depressive, OCD. Those fun little dopamine trips. And I think it's really noticeable how social media is designed to engage that, and how bad it is. So I have to be on social media for work because you literally cannot have a career in the arts without it now, but at the same point, you can feel it. It will trip an OCD loop and then you get stuck for hours. So I try really hard to set timers and to set things that chuck me off, and I don't have it on my phone, and I have to boot up the laptop and I have to log in every single time. But I also find again, Catherine Cross, fantastic book about this, not to mistake activism for getting a hit of dopamine online. They are 2 totally different things, and please let us move away from this idea that getting ratioed or ratioing somebody else is effective. It's not activism. It's content for the content machine. It's nothing.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, yes, down in the front. Yes, we have several hands.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Mm.
Thinking about it a lot in terms of law and public life, which you might just call law and order. This is how I was very across that. But then I started thinking about cultural organising and the cultural work that you've done. Like, just thinking about the list of things that you did in your life and the Queer network, and thinking about Transpose, and thinking about how this space, the space of cultural organising, is that space where, you can fall in love with the present, in the present, with the present. And I feel like there's, I can go for ages about the relationship between law and culture, but to speak a little bit more about where you see trans culture, maybe in this kind of grander arc.
I mean, I feel I've become very boring when it comes to talking about like sort of doing trans culture, because I think the more I've grown Transpose as a platform, which, I started in a really shitty pub in 2011, and it literally, we talk about this quite openly, started it to raise funds for a friend because the NHS was denying the fact that he was disabled because he was trans. So, crazy, duh, making things up, that's what you do. And couldn't get funds for a wheelchair, so we fundraised for that, and people asked for it to come back, it came back. Said friend then made his debut at Transpose in like 2016 and now has gone on to found and run one of the UK's biggest disabled arts organisations, and which is crazy. But the more I've done Transpose, I think the more I've just felt, this sounds terrible, I just, one, it's a way of getting people a platform that they deserve. It's not about the content that they create. It's not really about how I want to make sure that it is a multiplicity of what trans culture means. I have no stake in deciding what that is. That's for everyone to have a stake in. And the mess of it actually is what I find really interesting, that it's not coherent, that coherency emerges with different curators. They'll bring in a certain sets of artists, but people will disagree. They will have contrasting and sometimes competitive and sometimes complementary ways of doing that. I kind of see a lot of, until I get funding, and because at the moment I've been funded by Arts Council, thankfully, for a while, and Barbican have been incredible actually at putting money in and resources to make it as wheelchair accessible as possible. I don't know, just gonna put it out there. Most theatres are not wheelchair accessible backstage. There are very, very few theatres in the entirety of the UK where people who use electric wheelchairs can perform. There are practically no theatres that have changing spaces, toilets backstage, if they have them front of house. Most theatres don't have them front of house. I'm struggling to think of a single theatre apart from Barbican that has a adult hoist backstage so that people can get changed. So the more I've gotten into the nitty-gritty of that, sort of what are the provisions getting people over. For one of the transposes, we had a lot of artists from Turkey, and it was about making sure to support their visa applications, so the transpose was effectively part of that visa process to enable people to be over here. I think my job is to get money into people's hands, and as prosaic and as boring as that is, I think that's kind of how I'm feeling about it now, that I don't feel I have much time for thinking more than simply wanting to get artists who deserve a stage on a stage, and get artists who are not being paid to get paid, and get artists who aren't having their access needs met to have those needs met. And I will think differently when I'm at the point where we're all in a room backstage being like, what show are we making? What are we? But I think particularly in that moment of precarity, and in that moment where, moment of precarity, everything is precarity. Again, it's always. So that's where I am right now. It's just. Yeah. Yeah, and trying to get people a good enough wage that that's going to pay the bills for the next 6 months, because, who the fuck is hiring trans people? Yeah, so, sorry. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hi. Oh God, I'm trying to think how to do that in 5 minutes. No. I think I find it really interesting because I do feel that hunger, and I do think, I remember again being a teenager, and it would have meant the world to me to see, a picture of trans people in the 1920s holding hands and being happy. And yet, I'm always really interested as I've started following so many Instagram accounts which are just sort of reposting effectively slush, yeah, and with, again, really pulled out of context and just, again, this kind of like, oh, back in the days when, and I don't know. Is it just a human thing? Is this just what humans are like? Are we just real bad at this? Is it the same thing as we sit around and we look at our family pictures and go, oh, grandma and grandma were so happy. And I was looking at my, there you are, I was looking at my family photographs. My nana is now very elderly, very beautiful and wonderful lady who was absolutely fine with me being trans and queer, strangely enough. But though it did mean that she used to ring me up and tell me about all the trans plot lines on the different soap operas she was watching. So it's very important that I knew that Waterloo Road had like a trans student. Don't even get me started. I can say this because she's not going to watch it. She was so happy when some lesbians moved into her road because the world had come to her sleepy, sleepy, small Welsh town. So she rang me up and she was like, we've got lesbian ladies who've moved. But don't tell them I said that because that would seem very impolite. Sorry, Nana. But looking at my Nana's wedding photos and, this picture of my Abba and my Nana looking so beautiful and happy and, she's wearing this white silk dress and he's wearing this suit and it looks so perfect. And I know, looking at that picture, that cake was cardboard because it was just after the war and there was no money for a cake. The sugar rations were still going. So it was a cardboard cake that was being painted and decorated with flowers, and her dress was made of a parachute. And on their first date, parachute silk, and which then would be shared around the congregation so that all the brides could wear it. And on their first official date, he took her courting and got her a whole pig's head from the butcher, which was, don't turn your nose up at a whole pig's head when... I mean, she was really pleased about it. Like, she continues to talk about, the rationing was so bad and they were hungry and then the whole pig's head. I'm not trying to laugh, like I genuinely, but again, we don't see that story. We don't see that. And they were they were happy, but my God, they were scarred from the war and they were living a really rough time. And, all of the narratives, all the suffering of their life, which was considerable by that young age, is not present in that picture. And I think maybe that's something I would love to restore. I think we've had obviously far too much, we didn't exist in the past, or everything is tragic and everything is tragedy, but by the same token, I don't want the pictures which are, and it's fine and good because we suffer now and I'm suffering now, we're all suffering now, and I want the whole thing. So I don't know if that's even vaguely an answer, but... Hi! Yes. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm.
pulling them apart and drawing attention to how contingent they are, how messy they are. But then from the state side and from kind of outside of that the people who sort of know that trans people exist and know what that means, there's this relentless need to put people into boxes and to provide, like to find a space to make trans people legible in some sense. Like the case of things is in India where there was a binary gender in the legal system, and then to provide for trans people, it's like, okay, well then we'll produce this third gender category. And like these kind of nonsense conversations in the US about like sports, we need to produce this third gender category and stuff. I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts about like there's that tension between the people who have this situated experience of being within this blurriness, and then from the other side there's this endless need for, I don't know, for human beings to put people into boxes, to recognize each other in like bureaucratic processes and all this stuff. I just kind of
Oh my God. You know. I think, I don't know. Again, how long? How do we save the world? I mean, I think there's a tension. I don't quite know how we do. And I'm in one of these situations where I also feel like saying, do we even know what the future is here? Or do we even know what future we're going to make? Do we just keep muddling along? I think I'm very, very ambivalent about sex gender markings in general. I think as both a feminist and as a genderqueer person, I really don't want the state to have any business categorizing me or in fact holding quite a bit of data on me or selling it off to Palantir. But I also know that it is easier for me traveling to Canada to see my family where I have an X on my internal documents for travel than I don't get so many weird looks and weird questions at the passport control. I think the whole sort of idea of gender and failed state, I really started, I guess maybe again, feeling from a young age and being out from a young age and thinking about the different things, you know, being at sort of the verbal abuse in the streets was never about being placed, it was always about being unplaced. And I think that was, again, that it was always dyke, not in a kind of like, you're with a woman, but failed state. And then, you know, pufta, again, it was always just kind of like, whatever this is not doing it right. And I think it's the same thing then, I think people literally would call me a pervert. And you were like, oh, this is a really interesting, you know, this is horrible, but it's really, what are we going for here? And like the meaning was just like, you're not right. You failed. And I think that, like, gender is an exam, but of course gender is like an exam. You know, and we're trained for it all my life. And surely I mean, does not everyone here have a memory of being a child and failing or being scared of failing? I remember, you know, being 11 years old and starting puberty early, and at that point, you know, being like, oh God, you know, what I want versus what the world wants. And I had no idea how to shave my legs. And I remember, like, shaving my legs, and, you know, I have quite a lot of body hair, and which I like, but I felt I had to take it off because I knew I'd be bullied at school for it. Had no idea how to use a razor. My poor mom came in and like my legs were red raw because I dry shaved and she was like, "What the hell are you?" You know, and I was like, I didn't want to be bullied because I was being bullied for being failing already at gender, and what I wanted didn't matter. It was just please don't punish me for failing, and I don't know how we overcome. It feels like, is it innate? What even is innate? But, you know, a horrific human tendency to be like, I love to put things in boxes. Here is my box. And how we reconcile like a very basic need for safety with an ideological concern. But again, which is safe, which is not safe? I'm afraid I don't have any answers. I have questions and I have feelings. And I feel like it's important for those of us who have more questions rather than just, yes, I would love to have a third gender category and I would love the government to have my details, and I think it's important that we keep asking questions, but yeah.
Although, not any more questions this evening, unfortunately, at least not here. What I would like to do now is whisk CN to the back over there, where there is a table with a big stack of wonderful books, Trans Like Me, and there will be a further opportunity for people to talk to CN there, which we're going to do in about a minute's time. So just to close this, one more time, therefore, can everyone give a very warm round of applause to CN Lester?